Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have an exciting session today. It's called Leading Through Adversity. We are joined by three amazing women to tell us about how they've led through what I think we can all agree has been an incredibly tough, challenging year, but with a lot of opportunity. We're joined by Carolyn Dinich, who's an MP and a Minister for the Digital and Culture. We're joined by Ann Kantz, who's Global Vice Chair of MasterCard. And we're joined by Sarah Soulé, who's the president at Red Ventures. Let's start with introductions. That's always fun. Who wants to go first? Tell us about you, what you do, your role, and how you came to where you are today.
I'm happy to start, if that's okay, Rachel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, as Rachel said, I'm the Global Vice Chair of MasterCard. I also chair a global campaign called the 30% Club, which works with chairmen and CEOs of companies to get more women on boards. We want a minimum of 30% women on global boards, and we want a minimum of 30% women in C-suites as well. I've had a long career, over 40 years, and I actually graduated from university with a pure mathematics degree, went into engineering, became the first woman ever to work on the offshore oil and gas rigs in Britain, and then became a banker. And I stayed a banker for many years until just before the crash in 2008, where I became the CEO of Lehman Holdings in Britain during Chapter 11. That was an interesting job. Later in life, I've joined MasterCard for the last 10 years, which is a big growth, big tech company, which reaches about 3 billion people on the planet right now with its products and services. And before being the vice chair, I ran everything outside America, which is across 200 countries for MasterCard.
Great. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Yes, happy to go next. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Sarah Soulé, and I am a president at Red Ventures, which, for those of you that are not familiar, is a large media and marketing company that's really helping consumers make some of life's most important decisions. And so in the education vertical, we're really helping connect adult learners with great career opportunities for them, and then the education providers to support the career journey that they're on. I am also very involved in a lot of our women's initiatives at Red Ventures and a lot of our employee resource groups. So I've helped found and have chaired our women's employee resource group for the last probably 7 years. And then more recently have moved over to help our Venture Out resource group, which is our LGBTQ group, which has been fantastic. I've been at Red Ventures for about 10 years. I've worked across a number of our different industry groups there. Prior to Red Ventures, worked in consulting for a couple of years, in product development, in banking, and then in digital marketing at Rosetta Stone.
Fantastic.
Shall I go next?
Yes, please.
So, hello, everybody. My name is Caroline Dinich. I've been a minister across various government departments now for the last 6 years, most recently digital culture, media and sport as Minister for Digital and Culture, but previously a range of things, including Department of Health and Social Care and Minister for Women and Equalities. I've been an MP since 2010, and prior to that, for 20 years, I ran my own business. I started a business when I was 19 years old, manufacturing corporate identity products. And I fell into the world of politics completely by accident, come from a nice, normal business background, just have a very big mouth, and tended to speak out about things in my local area that were troubling me. And hey presto, ended up with a career in politics, a lesson to everybody. So yeah, really pleased to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you, all of you. So I'm really interested in understanding a bit more about your journey to become the leaders that you are today. I'd really love to understand who are your role models as you went through life, and then also many of you mentioned like careers that stereotypically we're not a part of as women. So banking, oil rigs, entrepreneurship, politicians, all of this, right? I would love to understand how and at what point did you know that you were strong enough to break through those stereotypes to be what you are today?
Do you want us to shout out, or do you want to choose us? Shall I start?
You shout out, or if you don't, you know what? I will choose you.
Take them from the class. So look, the thing about entrepreneurship, I think, about going into your own enterprise is it can be quite terrifying if you don't know anything about it. I represent a constituency in the UK which has got very low new startup businesses, and I think it's just because historically it's been an area where people have traditionally worked for the things like the shipbuilding industry and the defence industry. It's around Portsmouth Harbour, the home of the Royal Navy, and I think it is quite a cultural thing. I think enterprise and entrepreneurship is cultural. So I started my own business because my mum had her own business, and so there seemed nothing crazy about that to me. It seemed like a very normal thing to do, and I think that is such a lesson in so many fields of work, that having role models, having realizable role models that you can see yourself being, are so important. And mentoring people that can encourage you to sort of take that step, that see you along the way and help you overcome some of the barriers, but also as women, people who can encourage you to take those steps, because we don't always feel confident enough to do it. So I think for me, that was how my journey started. And then I guess with politics, it was something that happened so incrementally, but right at the very beginning, when I was first thinking about standing as a local councillor, I was 25, and I'd been approached to ask to stand as a councillor. A very elderly gentleman who'd lost the seat I was going to stand for 8 years previously rang me up and said, I don't know what you're thinking about. You can't possibly do this. You're far too young and you're a woman. He was an old retired wing commander from the RAF. And so I actually did think, well, I don't know much about politics. I'm not sure whether I could do this. I think I would really like to represent my community, but maybe he's right. Maybe I need more life experience. Maybe I'm not the right person for this. But fortunately for me, the other lady who was a local councillor just happened to ring me about 5 minutes later, and she rang me and she said, I hear that you're thinking of standing to be on the local council. It's brilliant. You're exactly what we need. If you got elected, you'd be the youngest councillor in Winchester ever. And that, we need diversity of thought and diversity of background on everything from businesses to local authorities to government, and you'd be brilliant. So it was her encouragement and her mentoring which really helped me get started in politics. And from being a local councillor, I stood in general elections and became an MP and then a minister. And so I think it just shows you how that one conversation could have potentially put me off of this career choice, but another conversation got me back on the right track.
That's great, Caroline. Maybe a slightly different experience in terms of role models and how I've thought about my career. I've worked in financial services, I worked in consulting, and then really in digital marketing. And at a lot of those places, there weren't female role models at the top at the time. And so a lot of the inspiration that I've gotten over the years is from peers, and even some of my male colleagues that really believed in me and pushed me and fought for me. But what's been amazing is that I've been at Red Ventures for 10 years. We didn't have any strong female leaders when I started. We didn't have any women on our leadership team, and now we've made some really great progress. And so I spend a lot of time within the organization making sure that others don't have that same experience, and that we have really strong female mentorship and sponsorship across the organization. And so that's I think part of what continues to drive me and motivate me.
I have to agree with Sarah. I didn't see people in industry when I started that were female. Although I went to a Catholic school, and actually the headmistress, who was a nun, had a degree in chemistry, so she was actually scientific. So that was pretty interesting. And similar to what Caroline said, I grew up in the north in a shipbuilding, defense building area in Newcastle. It was heavy industry, if you like. And it was really my professor at university that got me into being an engineer, because what happened was that the research station rang up the university and said, oh, we want somebody to come over here and design experiments for the physicists and engineers and chemists. And my professor said, why don't you go along and have the interview? And I said, really? So the thing is, I went, I got the job. And then I actually changed my discipline, moving more into the engineering side. And while I was there, I think I was about 22 years old, and Margaret Thatcher came up to visit. She also had a chemistry degree, by the way. And at that time, my politics were very left-wing, of course, because I was from Newcastle. And I thought, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this woman. But there was a benefit, because they actually decorated the women's bathrooms. That was basically me in the typing pool. Got brand new paint and a big brush-up job on the bathroom. Anyway, she arrived, and actually she was superbly charismatic, as you might expect a prime minister to be. And afterwards, I thought, I've completely misjudged her. I'm almost falling for the propaganda. She's much broader. She's much more intelligent than that. She made you feel as if you were the only person in the room. She was amazingly charismatic. And that changed my view of female leaders, meeting her when I was 22. And I think that she had an influence on my life, because I thought, you can be what you want to be, and you can go far. And we'd already seen Indira Gandhi, in India, but meeting the person is such a difference, I think.
I think also, funnily enough, growing up with a female prime minister is it sends out a really strong message, actually, to young women, because at no point she became prime minister in 1979 when I was sort of 7. So I don't really remember who was prime minister before that. But it never occurred to me as a sort of young girl going through school that women couldn't be prime minister or women couldn't be politicians. And so much of what we put in our own paths, and the obstacles we put in our own paths, are because of those somehow preconceptions that there are girls' jobs and boys' jobs, or that there are careers that we shouldn't consider. And it never occurred to me that wasn't a job that women could do, because one had done it so successfully. It didn't really occur to me that there weren't any sort of female junior ministers underneath her, but I think that was interesting.
It was. Actually, my husband's a school teacher, an 11-year-old boy. When Thatcher was succeeded by John Major, got his hand up and said, "Can men be prime minister?" Because his whole life, never been a woman. Amazing.
That's fantastic.
That's great. I mean, I think that really gets at the point that we need to have diverse leadership as we go forward. It's a lot easier to be, when you're young, it's a lot easier to dream big of what you can actually see. And I always think of, a picture I saw of Kamala Harris when she took over, and a young Black girl just looking at the TV screen, taken from behind, like she can see it now, and it's now a possibility. So it's really important, I think, that we continue to rise and put women at the top, diverse leadership, and push for that as much as we can. One tough question, a little bit. You women are all amazing leaders, obviously, but it really interesting to hear. Has there ever been a time where you've messed something up as a leader? What happened? What was the outcome? You don't all have to answer it if you don't want to, but it'd be interesting to hear and learn from you.
I don't know whether I would say that I messed a lot of things up, though I do think that when I was in my 30s, I found that, the people who were working for me loved me, my boss loved me, but my peers in Citibank really, we weren't gelling that well. And it was the Citibank suddenly introduced this 360-degree feedback. It was completely eye-opening, because people told you what they really thought of you. And I had a bit of a style then of looking at something and being quite critical of it. So if, say, I was, leading sales and I was selling a product to someone, and somebody else was leading operations and technology, and they were delivering the product but weren't doing a very good job, I would have a tendency to be over there saying, listen, you've got to deliver it this way and blah, 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 instead of trying to influence those people in a good way. I was a very kind of critical and directive with my peer group. And it wasn't until I got that feedback, I thought, that's an absolutely awful style. You're never going to make progress with that. Obviously, you need to persuade and convince people and, use all of those softer skills to achieve things. And I think seeing yourself in the mirror and understanding it, and then having the sense to adjust your style is really important. And I think people should be exposed to that very early in their leadership career, because that's when you can change and you can really make a difference. And of course, in today's world, where, the power of the network and your ability to perform in the business world is all about your influencing skills, really focusing on that early is a good idea.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think I don't really have many sort of examples that I can put my finger on, but being in the world of politics is just like a complete learning curve from beginning to end. And you make mistakes, you do things wrong. There are things that you could do better, and then you have to just go again. And in the world of politics, as in so many other worlds, it's played out quite often in the media. And as a government minister, quite often we have to go and do what they call the morning media round, where you sort of basically bounce from one media platform to another, doing the sort of news broadcasts and on radio and TV, and it's a bit like the world's most scary roller coaster. You kind of start at sort of 5 to 7 in the morning and get off at 9:30 in the morning, and there's not really an opportunity to sort of get off in between that. And by about 9:30, you feel like you need a glass of wine, but very often, when it's finished, you think, oh, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I hadn't said that. But you just have to learn, and you have to go again and try and get better and grow as you go through. But you can't hold on to mistakes you make. You just kind of try and learn from them, and actually they make you bigger and stronger.
That's great, Caroline. One thing that comes to mind for me, over the last year is maybe not fully appreciating the impact that COVID and a lot of the social justice issues was having on my team, and taking way too long to address that and recognize that and understand that that a lot of people today, at least in the US, they're looking to their employers more and more to help them navigate some of these really complex social issues, and to take a stand and to create a platform and a space where people can have those conversations. And so for sure, that was a lesson learned for me over the last 12 months.
Great. And Sarah, you dived into the next topic a bit, which is fantastic. I'd love to talk a bit about the last year. What a year it was. COVID, we've had the Black Lives Matter movement. It's been a lot. And obviously very challenging for leaders, I think, across the board, to understand how to move their organizations forward and still take care of their organizations. I would love to understand from all of you, and Sarah, you answered this a bit, but what have you found the most challenging personally and professionally? And now that we're sort of coming out of this, we hope, fingers crossed, what have you enjoyed, and what are you looking forward to enjoying as we slowly emerge? Who wants to start?
I think when you're leading through COVID, people are feeling very vulnerable. And one of the things that happened very early in our business was that the CEO stood up and said to everybody all over the world, look, nobody's going to lose their job in MasterCard because of COVID. And just those simple words said, you know, in a very genuine way by the person in charge, it's massive. It's absolutely massive, because people's minds are put at rest then. And then, you know, in response to things like Black Lives Matter, well, in response to the terrible killing that, you know, that we've all seen too many times probably on the TV, I think, there was a big welling up across the whole organization, and, you know, around the world. Actually, it wasn't just America that was impacted by this. I mean, obviously we're recording from Britain as well, and you know, I was quite pleased with the response that we thought of as a company, because we started to look at it and say, what are we actually doing for people here? And we put together a fund of about $500 million, where we said, let's start really looking at ourselves and saying, what are we doing to help Black-led companies, entrepreneurs? What are we doing in terms of opening up our supply chain? Are we being fair with who we're buying from? What does it look like for the employees in the company? You know, how many people have we got VP and above in the company who are Black Americans? And what new target do we want to set for that? So we did a lot of those things. In the 30% Club at the same time, the 30% Club had been very focused on women, but of course, and Rachel, I don't have to tell you this, you know, that when you talk about women and women's rights and women being on boards, sometimes people look at it and say, well, is it just white women? Is it just wealthy white women? I mean, are we actually including everybody here? So at the 30% Club in Britain, I went out to all of the CEOs and chairs and said, look, we'd like to align with the Parker Report and have at least one person of color on every board. But also, because we're the 30% Club, I'd like 50% of these seats to go to women of color. You know, I mean, let's get the gender intersectionality in here as well. And you know what? They welcomed it with open arms, because they were sitting there thinking, what can we do? And often I think business leaders find themselves in a position of really trying to figure out how to respond and feeling relieved and happy if there's something they can do.
That's amazing. So many things in that, your response, that have just triggered thoughts in my head, and just me as a Black woman as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, incredible response. I think, I mean, the pandemic's been just so mad. I actually took this role, my most recent role in the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport. I got moved into this role at the last reshuffle, which was in February 2020. And then almost immediately the world went into shutdown. So there were members of my team that I hadn't met at the point that we started working remotely, and immediately had to sort of start putting together a package of support for our culture, our creative industries, some of our sort of massive cultural venues and our arts venues, to try and see them through the pandemic. And the people I was working with on a sometimes, you know, daily basis, all the time. I mean, you know, you feel like you know them intimately because you saw the inside of their house. You'd sort of seen their kids and their cat walking across the keyboard. But I'd never actually met them in real life. And there is so much, I think you only realize the kind of the soft stuff, the conversations that happen outside of meetings, the body language you pick up on, the "are you okay" kind of conversations that happen on the fringes, that just don't happen on a screen. A screen is just such a two-dimensional way of being able to conduct yourself and be able to work with your teams. It's been really lovely the last few weeks being able to go to events where I actually do get to meet, in some cases, people that I've been working with for the last 20 months. And in some cases, they're so much taller or smaller than I thought they would be. And I think I am as well. But I think, you know, it's really trying to find imaginative ways to keep your team together and look after each other has been a massive challenge. And I think when it comes to diversity, you know, I'm with Anne. I just feel that all businesses work so much better if they better reflect society as a whole. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? When you have got diversity of thought and diversity of experience, And I used to be Minister for Women and Equalities, and worked a lot with the 30% Club, but also with doing a lot of work with women on boards. And at the time that I got involved, there were more men called John leading FTSE 100 companies than there were women, and which is never a good place to be. So I just think, in my department, we've been about trying to make ourselves, the most diverse department across government. But actually, for me, the key is not only attracting people into roles, not only making sure people are getting there, but also making sure that they want to stay there, and it's an environment which is nurturing, where people feel comfortable, where they feel valued. Because in other industries that have a really high attraction rate, they don't always have a very high retention rate, and I think that's something we have to be really mindful of.
Yeah, Caroline, you hit on a number of things that really resonate with me. I moved into my current role about 2 weeks after the pandemic hit. So very similar experience of leading a new team, none of whom I had really met in person before. They had just been through an acquisition. We had acquired the company. A number of their senior leaders had left. And then on top of all that, they were dealing with COVID and worrying about their job security and a lot of the social justice movements that were going on. And so it was a tough time to really figure out, how do I build trust really quickly with this group of people over Zoom? And so we did a number of different things. We talked a lot about mental health, because a lot of folks were really struggling, and we did a number of what we called listening sessions, or just conversations where folks would come in and just share, what was on their minds, how were they feeling, what were they struggling with. And I think having the leaders on our team do that and share and be vulnerable really allowed folks to open up and stay engaged and feel valued and included. And so, that was one of the things that we really tackled. And then, because our business is, we do have a large media platform, we've also spent a lot of time thinking about and developing content around how can we leverage the platform that we have to help those outside of our organization. And so our Healthline team has put out a ton of really great content around COVID. On our team, we've created some hubs for underrepresented student groups, so undocumented students, things like that, which have been really valuable as a way for the team to feel like they're making an impact and to feel engaged in moving the needle.
Fantastic. And over this, crazy time this last year, have you seen changes in your leadership style, any of you, or have you been pretty consistent throughout?
I always thought of myself as a very compassionate leader, an empathetic leader. I think this last year, in some ways, challenged that notion and challenged what it really means to be empathetic and compassionate, and to really know and understand your people and what they're going through. So I wouldn't say it necessarily changed, but it certainly heightened some skills.
Very good. Awesome. So my next question is a bit personal to me, but I'm really interested in hearing your perspective. So I always think about leadership is obviously about leading the ship and making sure it goes in the right direction, but it's also about empowering those behind you or under you to drive change. And so I'm really, interested in understanding, how did you empower your employees to act and drive change? And this, is particularly important to me because that's what Google did for me. I realized we needed to do something in this region around supporting Black founders and changing the stats. And I went to my leadership and they gave me the keys to the car, and hence we have a fund. So I'd really love to hear how you guys think about that, you ladies think about that, when you're steering your organization.
Well, 10 years ago, when I first took over as the head of international for MasterCard, I kind of hopped on a plane, traveled around the world, looked at everything, and then went, I only have a handful of countries that are led by women. You know, why are there not more women around here? And so for the next 2 years, I went out and said to all of my hiring managers and thousands of people, you know, I said, I would like more. And absolutely zero happened. So I thought, obviously, I'm a great global leader. You know, I can't influence anything. So I said, okay. I said, I tell you what. I said, every country had the position that comes up. I'm not going to tell you who to put in place, but I'm going to ask you, the hiring manager, to talk to me about why you chose the candidate you chose. Very interesting. Once you know, as a senior person, you put scrutiny on something, you're not telling them what to do, but you're really paying attention to what they do. It changed things dramatically. In the first year, we got 10% more women. And then, you know, we were over 30% within about 3 or 4 years, because there was a relative turnover. And the thing that was really interesting to me was, it wasn't super easy countries. Yes, we had a woman leading France and Spain and Scandinavia and so on. But we had Nigeria, Venezuela, the Ukraine, and the point being that everywhere in the world, you know, women leaders were coming forward and being given P&L jobs that, you know, would put them on succession to being CEOs of a company, because when you're running a business in a country, you're de facto, you know, the person running everything, including the P&L and all the people on the ground and the interface with the government. And it's a great job to have. So that was an interesting change to see happen, and I was very pleased with it.
I just love that. Fantastic. I mean, I think it's very different in government, because as well as sort of running our own bits of government departments, we're also members of parliament. So we have to also run our own sort of constituency and parliamentary offices and look after our constituents. We all have around about 100,000 constituents. And so it's an interesting balance, trying to keep all of those different priorities successfully running, and being able to delegate, I think, is just probably the biggest, and trust people to make mistakes, learn from them, and, you know, not sort of try and wrestle back control if people don't do things exactly the way that you might have done them, you know, is such a big talent to learn. But I think one of the key things that I've taken in various government roles has been about trying to push the agenda of women and diversity more generally, you know, in everything. And so in the most recent role, in the culture role, we have a lot of arm's length bodies, a lot of galleries, a lot of institutions that have traditionally been quite male dominated. And I think just thinking about where we recruit from, how we advertise, you know, how we attract more people into those positions is absolutely vital. And you know, and it's something that I really want to empower my team to think about, you know, how we just do things differently, because you know what you get, you do the same as you've always done, you get the same as you've always got.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, one of the things that we're doing specific to social impact to empower our teams is giving them a platform and setting aside funds for all of our team members who are involved in their own efforts, their own nonprofit work, to come and kind of pitch that to the organization to garner support. And so really encouraging folks to just get involved in their communities, and then leveraging the platform that we have to do that work.
Fantastic. And I think we're running out of time. So if we could just get, you know, fast fire around just one piece of advice for all the aspiring women leaders out there to close the session out, that would be amazing.
I was talking to one of our senior women the other day, it was yesterday, in fact, and she said, I'm 53, I maybe think about retiring. And I went, good God, you're just a baby, and my thought on this is, life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Think Janet Yellen. Think Judi Dench took over as M in the Bond movies when she was in her 60s and lasted through to her 80s. Don't think that you have to be in a certain job at a certain age and stage in your life. Just go for what you want. Keep climbing.
I'm going to take that advice for myself.
That's great advice, Anne. I would say don't sweat the small stuff. This advice my dad gave me and continues to give me over and over. And if it's not gonna matter in a year and you're not gonna remember it in 2 years, then don't sweat it.
Yeah, great advice. And mine would be just don't put so much pressure on yourselves. Don't try and don't be so unkind to yourself. We always try and strive to be perfect at everything, particularly women. And actually, do you know what? Sometimes we're pretty good as we are without putting in that additional pressure on ourselves to be utterly perfect all the time.
Amazing tidbits of advice for the women out there. I'm sure everybody appreciates this. And with that, I'm going to close out the session. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for being a part of this. And I look forward to the rest of the day.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you all so much. Great to meet you, ladies.
Yeah, great to meet you too. Bye.
Bye.